Okay, well, everybody has a copy of this first slide. What it does is give you a series of questions and basically give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to cover. What we're raising is a series of questions, in a sense, that we should understand that unconventional gas drilling into the shale and other layers is not regular your grandfather's gas well, as there's a marvelous paper on a website called chenangogreens.org. They have this very good paper that's called "It's Not Your Grandfather's Gas Well." And it's not. It's not a gas well that goes into a pocket of gas. What you're dealing with here is a low permeable geology, and that we'll get into some of these topics. It's a very big subject, very hard to get your head wrapped around. But basically, the gas does not flow. And in order to get it to move, literally, the shale layer has to be turned into rubble. Although it's underground, it's still rubble. And what is there to be worried about? Okay, the scale of development is one thing. And then in terms of what happens is there is drilling, there's fracturing, there's gas processing, and there's waste handling. All of these stages entail contamination. And you have to understand that this is a process that could only happen in a deregulated situation where the industry is allowed to follow what they're called best management practices on the honor system. There's very little follow-up. There's exemptions from much of the protective legislation that it was designed in the 70s, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act. The EPA is not, had been told to stand down, is still not really activated. And often the states and the regulators function as facilitators in order to maximize production. So what you want to do is think about whether we're in a situation where there are resources. What are these resources? These are the resources of the commons, the water, the air. Who owns them? Whose right is it to sell them? Whose right is it to destroy them? What rights do the future generations have? There's a setup now between public and private rights, mineral rights versus surface and downstream rights. And also the basis of this is really a public health crisis. If you look at it in terms of public health, where you have shortages of clean air, clean water, you can't grow food, you have tremendous disease impacts. This is a public health crisis. This is the Jonah gas field, the upper Green River Valley in Wyoming. It's the area between the Yellowstone and the Grand Teton National Parks to the north and the Red Desert to the south. The upper Green River Valley is the longest big game migration route in the lower 48 states, and it's a crucial link that ties the greater Yellowstone ecosystem together. Now, in this area, there was 100,000 big game animals dependent on the valley for their survival. This herd is currently down 45%. And the reason for it is this. What you see on the screen is the Jonah natural gas field, as it's become known, in 1986. Now you notice the two roads that are there. And understand the area is about 7 miles. It's mostly undisturbed sage and grassland. This shows you 1999. You have well pads, and you can see little dots that are the open pits. Each pad is 3 to 4 acres. The next shot, 2006. You see how they're infilled. They're now approximately 1 per 40 acres. This particular shot was taken from a satellite, but was colored in to match the rest. Now, this is the same area taken from a small plane, and This shows the one well pad every 30 to 40 acres, which is approximately what will be in Pennsylvania for sure, and possibly in this area also. The real impact of gas drilling. This list is really only a partial list, but understand the first initial parts of it. Imagine I'm holding a glass of water. In this glass of water is life itself. And as life itself, it has to be usable, clean, pure. This water has to be able to be water that you can drink. If the water is contaminated, you will be poisoned. And what happens with this drilling is you get surface water pollution, deeper aquifer contamination because of the process, which we will explain. There's air pollution from venting and movement of volatile compounds. All of these materials have effects on health and on the environment itself. The net effect is that you see the bottom two lines, the soil and food chain is contaminated by drilling muds and fracturing chemicals. Once you have a loss of water, you have an effect where you cannot grow your own food. You can't process food, you can't have animals. And then in addition, your whole place, as both in reality and image, is no longer the clean and wholesome place. You have tremendous crime, you have drug use, you have wildfires, you have tremendous traffic. As I say, these are just some of the impacts. Now, when the drilling is done, the initial drilling is a rig is put up and the well is drilled down to the level that it's going to be used, the geological layer that they hope to extract gas from. Along the way, there is a casing process that's done to protect the aquifer, the water where you drink. Now, you have to remember that initially, the drilling is done into the raw earth. There's no casing. And then in addition, there are tremendous compromising situations with the casing. I've heard testimony from the people who testified before the New York State DEC scoping hearings that 50% of all casings fail within 15 years. Plus there's usually a considerable length of the well where there is no casing. Okay, then we get on to the fracturing. After the well is drilled, because the shale is, and other layers, including the Oriskany and the Herkimer layers, there's a whole series of layers. These are not layers where the gas flows freely. So when you understand that it's not just sand and water. Like at the bottom of this initial page, I heard a man named Ron Gillius from he's the director of the Pennsylvania Oil and Gas Management Division of the PADEP. He said, what have you got to worry about? It's only sand and water. I've heard similar statements from the New York State DEC. Colorado, they said the same thing. Up until this past year. And it's not just sand and water. To begin with, they couldn't do this with just sand and water. Now, I have my glass of water here. If I put sand in there, it settles right to the bottom. When you're at the beach and you see the waves come in, the water moves around, the sand settles. The sand does not stay in suspension. In order to suspend the sand, to propel it into the layer where they want to use it to prop open, it's called a proppant, to prop open the fractures once they're made, this sand has to be held in a material of equal density to the sand. The specific gravity has to be similar. Otherwise, it would settle out. They would have a pipe full of sand, and that would be it. So the material that's used is a mixture that's made to suspend the proppant and to allow the the gas to flow once they've pushed it into the formation. Now, when you hear about these statements that the fracturing takes 3 to 5 million gallons of water, you have to think to yourself, okay, here's a hole in the ground, and perhaps there's a horizontal leg of the drilling, which they do. They go down, they can turn the drill bit, and they can go along the length of the formation. Now, when you think about it, you say, okay, here's this tube, and you could calculate the size of the tube and the size of the horizontal leg, and you can say, okay, how much water would it take to fill that? And even if you assume that there's no piping in it and there's no casing, you come up with a relatively small number. So what's actually happening here? What's happening is when they drill down and then they do the horizontal leg and they decide where they want to do the fracturing, they blow a hole in the pipe that goes down the wellbore, and then they start pumping fluid into the formation. And they keep pumping, and they keep pumping until the formation is filled. So if you could imagine you have a water pipe in your house and the water pipe breaks, it will fill up the house. You know, everybody's seen these comedies where the water's running in the bathroom, and then, you know, the guy closes the door and he goes back and he opens the door and all the water comes out. Well, because the bathroom was filled. Well, what happens in these formations that's filled with water is that they pump and pump and pump until they hit some impermeable barrier above, below, and somewhere out there. And at that point, only at that point, can the pressure build up. Because until that point, they're just still pushing it out. And at that point, the pressure builds up and builds up until the material, it causes like an earthquake and it shatters. Now what happens is you're not only shattering the formation itself, you're shattering that impermeable layer. So like for instance, now the people in Dimmock have fracturing fluid. They have material from the gas-bearing layers in the aquifers. Now they also have coliform bacteria because that was from the initial drilling through the raw earth with no casing. But the fracturing fluid is what we're dealing with here. So some of these materials now, what can be in the fracturing fluid can include benzene. Now the second item is 2-butoxyethanol, or 2BE. 2BE is very powerful. Now on the MSDS sheet, which is a sheet prepared, it's a material safety data sheet, it says that the 2BE disintegrates in 20 days. It doesn't. MSDS sheets are produced by the manufacturer with no vetting whatsoever. No one's looking over their shoulder. No one's reviewing the MSDS sheets. And then the third item in here is methanol, which is used extensively. It's a very large component because it acts as an acid corrosion inhibitor. And all of this material is pumped down. Now if you have 1 million gallons, or I think it's, how does this work? I think it's if you have 1 million gallons and it's a small fraction of the material is, of the fluid going down, is this mixture, which is a proprietary mixture. The gas and oil companies are allowed to keep it secret. That's one of the exemptions to the Community Right to Know Act, and the there's a whole series of them. And so the actual mixture is not known. However, there have been analysis done by way of spills by Dr. Coburn's office. Actually, she doesn't do the analysis, but she has analyzed the actual samples that were done, what the results were. Now, okay, so this material is the latest word from, the industry was saying for a while that it would be 70% would come back up, 30% would stay down. Now they're saying the opposite. Now they're saying 30 to 40% will come up and 70% will stay down. Dr. Coburn has said all along the way that up to 100% of the material can stay in the area where they're fracturing and anywhere else that connects. Now you see here, this is the fracturing process. You have a pumper, you have a sand truck, you have the blender truck, and this combination of trucks and stuff might change, but the basic idea is there. Now this is a very simplified diagram, but the idea is this. What the industry is ignoring, up until very recently, they haven't really been called on it quite as much as they are being now, is the existence of what's called natural fractures. Now, when you drive along a highway, you go through a cut and you see the roadway, next to the roadway you see cut through a mountain, you see all these rocks and you see the lines. Some of them are vertical, some of them are horizontal, some go in parallel to each other, but it's not a simple flat nothing. It is very complicated. That complication continues all the way down through all of the layers to even the producing formation. So when you do the fracturing, what happens is the fracturing causes connections to be made from the gas-bearing layer and into the natural fractures. In addition to water pollution, you have air pollution. You have pollution from the actual drilling, from processing, from venting, from leaks. Now in the initial drilling, you have mostly air pollution from the material like 2BE, which is actually used continuously. It's used in the fracturing fluid, and it's used continuously for the life of the well. It's used to knock water out as it's processed, as it goes into the pipeline. But as the well is completed, there's tremendous venting of the natural gas or N gas. Natural sounds too sweet. Let's call it something industrial, which it is. It's N gas. So when you add up all of these pollutions, and the air pollution is tremendous in places where there is drilling taking place. Now in Hickory, which Ron will talk about, there's only about 60 wells, 60?
68.
Okay, in a township that's 36 square miles, and the air already smells different. Some of the material that's can be in the air from a gas well can include hydrogen sulfide, which if you get a couple of breaths too many, you just die on the spot. Other things just take longer. People lose their sense of smell, which means everything you eat has only texture. Drilling impact radius. Now, when you have a well, there's a lot of noise, both from the drilling and then additionally from the compressor stations, of course from the trucks and so forth. You have water pollution from the surface, which can actually go quite a long way, but can also just be local. You have your initial view. In other words, what if you looked out from a particular place, it used to be hills, and now it isn't. It's industrial. Soil contamination, migrating wildlife. Now in the Jonah gas field instance, 45% of the wildlife is it's gone. Deer and other animals have been studied. They are attracted to the minerals in the waste, in the water, and the drilling muds. This is an intrinsic genetic desire for minerals, which in normal situations are few and far between, and they cannot help themselves. They drink it. And then they die, or they at least cannot reproduce, or there's other effects. And then you can get surface water pollution for hundreds of miles, especially if it goes in a river. Now, this is in the Susquehanna River Basin. This goes all the way to Chesapeake Bay. Whatever happens up here is going to be in the bay. And in addition, what you're looking at is the global effect of additional fossil fuels. Now, the idea of N-gas being better than fuel oil, I think, is totally flawed. I have studies that cover both the production and the processing, as well as the pipelines and compressors. Now, most of the studies used to say that N-gas is better than fuel oil are only looking at pipelines and compressors, and most of the studies have been in Europe, in particular in Russia. They have not been done here. So when you add in the air pollution and the greenhouse gas effect of all the pollution from the production and the processing to the pipelines and the compressor stations, you come within 5 to 6% of fuel oil in terms of the greenhouse gas effect, impact. And if to that you add the tremendous environmental effects, it does give you pause. N-gas is not something that should be regarded separately from any other fossil fuel. Now, this is New York. This is a map of the southern third of Smyrna, New York. Now this shows the overlapping units permitted by the New York DEC because they're being drilled into different formations. So you see how close together these wells are. Now, you can see the scale on the bottom of that map. This was bought from a planning office in this county. I think it's in Chenango County. I'm not sure of the county. But the scale is 1 to 57,000. That's inches. So when you figure this out, which takes you like a 6-step calculation, the DEC is not set up to be clear. The scale is approximately 1 inch to 9/10 of a mile. And when you look at this, you realize these wells are pretty close together. Now the PADEP spokesperson said that they don't expect the wells to be any closer than 1,000 feet apart. Expect to be any closer than 1,000 feet apart. Some of these wells are closer than that. Now, in addition, the definitions of, for instance, what is hazardous as opposed to what is toxic, all of these definitions make a huge difference, because when you look at the fracturing fluid and the returned water, what you have is a material that, if you drank it, would make you very sick. If it's in your water, it's going to make you sick. Very sick, but it's not declared toxic because most of these materials were taken by the Bush-Cheney administration from the list of toxic materials where they had been all along, and moved to another list that said they were hazardous, which meant that they were no longer required to treat them in a certain way. Now, all of these things, in addition to the exemptions, means that what you're looking at in terms of your future as people who live in this area is going to be seriously compromised if you allow this to happen. Okay, now this aspect of it is what we're seeing happening directly in Dimmock. It's very close here, and you must understand that this is what happens everywhere there is this type of gas drilling. The two pictures show come from a story about the contamination of the Trinity Woodbine Aquifer in North Texas. The gentleman shown had a good house. He had a little farm with goats, purebred goats, and then they did a gas well not too far from him, and his water was no longer drinkable. His goats began to die, and he was told that he shouldn't use the water even for watering the grass. So he is now hauling water for his family, trying to decide what to do. Of course, he can't sell his house because nobody's going to buy a house if you have no water. This is the same thing that's happened now in Dimmock. The PADEP has admitted that the material that's in the wells is production gas. Now, don't be mistaken. That's all that's measured is methane. It is not just methane that's appearing in the upper environment. The methane is only an indicator gas. They only have methane monitors. So what's happening is that they're measuring methane, but the full range of material can be there, which can include a whole slew of other volatile organic compounds, hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, and so forth, all of which are hazardous to your health. And also what's coming along with the material from the gas-bearing layer, or layers, which they have now connected, is also the fracturing fluid that opened those connections. This shows you a map with a series of places all around the country, including now the little piece in the middle is Denver City, Texas, which is a similar area that is a pretty well-developed gas field. This is also the grid that was laid out by Cabot Oil and Gas in Dimmock in the area that it had leased, at least a 3,000 acre, contiguous 3,000 acre area, and the grid that they laid out is approximately 1 per 40 acres with some infill. They're doing a similar thing now, and also this is Range Resources in Hickory, PA, and very similarly there are contaminations. Everywhere this type of gas drilling is done, there is contamination. It is an intrinsically contaminating process. And there are places where there are lawsuits now. In Ohio, there's the matter of the Bainbridge, English Drive, Bainbridge, 41 homes, and the town building and police department are suing the driller, all the subcontractors, and the people who leased. So just bear that in mind, that there are things happening in that direction. All of the Congress people in Colorado that made a lot of gas drilling happen were thrown out. And so as far as information happening in Colorado, it's a little different this year than it has been. They released, as of February 2008, they released the ingredients, the list of ingredients, 247 of them, that are in the fracturing fluids. However, they have not revealed the actual mixture, which can make a big difference. By the way, some of the ingredients are what's called biocides, which means they kill everything. Okay, so I guess that's it. Thank you.